What is there left to say about Mighty Number 9 at this point? Every detail about the rise and fall of Keiji Inafune and, of course, his games has already been discussed, dissected, examined, and turned over to the point where a lesser critic like myself has nothing new to add. People have asked why he felt the need to run multiple Kickstarters for Red Ash despite constantly delaying Mighty Number 9. There's been criticism for him turning the, gray and blue bomber into a massive franchise before the game was even released. Now there are questions why he feels the need to talk sequels before, again, the game is even released. Knowing he's already got so much egg on his face now, he's more omelet than man. There is nothing left to say, but the release of Mighty Number 9 tomorrow, there's one avenue left to explore in this mess. Behind the numerous controversies, we have to ask ourselves, will the game itself be any good?
Everybody loves Mega Man.
And meet Inafune, the man behind the Mega.
未来に対して
I had no idea my luck would go this well.
Despite the popular misconception, something he's done little to protest, KJ Inafune did not create Mega Man, or Rockman as he's known in Japan. The original design of the character in the game itself was actually devised by Akira Kitamura. Inafune was merely a graphic artist, inexperienced as a game developer and designer, and merely created the look of the character we know today. It was only in 2007, at an appearance at GDC, did Inafune finally state he didn't actually create the character or the game itself. I'm often called the father of Mega Man, but actually, his design was already created when I joined Capcom. My mentor, Capcom senior member Akira Kitamaru, who was the designer of the original Mega Man, had a basic concept of what Mega Man was supposed to look like, so I only did half the job in creating him. Even saying he did half the job is probably being a bit generous, but I'll give it to him. Over the years, Inafune's role became bigger within Capcom and the Mega Man franchise, eventually becoming producer, executive producer even, but never becoming the game director or project lead. His first game as a lead didn't come until 2011 with KO, King of Pirates for the 3DS. When Inafune left Capcom, he took the game with him to his new company, Concept. The game was set for release the following year in 2012, but was delayed numerous times, eventually set for release in 2014. It never appeared in 2014 though, and publisher Marvelous Inc. finally announced its cancellation in March 2015. According to a press release on Eurogamer, Marvelous ended up losing $3.8 million on the game. The surprising thing though, this happened years after Mighty Number 9 was funded on Kickstarter, and I'd say it would be totally forgotten if people knew about it to begin with. It really just flew under the radar. However, the situation explains so eloquently what is happening with Mighty Number 9, that this paragraph is infinitely more effective than whatever else I'll have to say. Inafune has never led a project before, and he's certainly never led a company. Now he's doing both for the first time, with a ton of pressure on his shoulders because of multiple Kickstarter campaigns and because of his own grand ambitions. Of course, it's because of these Kickstarters that there is so much pressure on him, otherwise his projects would be hyped certainly, but not to this degree, and not by people who are monetarily invested as well as emotionally. It's all part of a learning process for him. He has to learn how to design a game, how to manage a team, how to negotiate with publishers while writing Kickstarter updates and keeping the lights on in his office. But Inafune hasn't done himself any favors. Launching the Kickstarter for Red Ash wasn't a mistake in itself. I don't feel as if launching a Kickstarter campaign for a game before releasing your previous Kickstarter game is inherently wrong. Double Fine did the same thing with Massive Chalice, and while they got their fair share of heat for it, it was nowhere near the level Concept or Inafune got for Red Ash. The difference here, though, of course, is that the Red Ash anime Kickstarter went up at the same time. They secretly delayed Mighty Number 9 again, as not to scare off any potential Red Ash backers, and they secretly signed a publishing deal that doubtlessly took days, if not weeks or months of negotiating ahead of time. Add Inafune's admittance that he wants to turn Mighty Number 9 to a mega franchise, complete with movies, a cartoon show, comic books, and toys, despite the initial game not even being close to finished yet, and you've got yourself a powder keg ready to explode. We all know it did explode, of course. The level of respect people have for Keiji Inafune right now falls somewhere between Peter Molyneux and Donald Trump, but that's not what this episode is about. Let's ignore all of that. Everything that's happened outside the green and black walls of Kickstarter, and examine the campaign itself. See how far the project has come and how similar the final game is to what was initially pitched. Mighty Number 9 by Concept USA, LLC. That part is very important. Classic Japanese side-scrolling action evolved and transformed by Keiji Inafune, an all-star team of veteran Mega Man devs, and you! Whoa, how exciting! Originally it was seeking $900,000, though raised $3.8 million and change, making it the 5th highest funded video game on Kickstarter. After scrolling through all the updates and stretch goals, you finally get to the meat of the campaign. Mighty Number 9 is an all-new Japanese side-scrolling action game that takes the best aspects of 8 and 16-bit era classics you know and love and transform them with modern tech, fresh mechanics, and fan input into something fresh and amazing. There's a lot of bolding going on in there, something carried over to the next paragraph. You play as Beck, the 9th in a line of powerful robots, and the only one not infected by a mysterious computer virus that has caused mechanized creatures the world over to go berserk. Run, jump, blast, and transform your way through 6 stages, or more via stretch goals, you can tackle in any order you choose, using weapons and abilities stolen from your enemies to take down your fellow Mighty Number 9 robots and confront the evil that threatens the planet. Yes, much like Yooka-Laylee, which came sometime after this, Inafune is not shy about calling back to this game's predecessor, or would that be spiritual predecessor? As was the case with Yooka-Laylee, this game is specifically designed to bring back a dead franchise in everything but name alone, and that obviously being Big Rig's over-the-road racing. To go back to Yooka-Laylee again, Inafune makes it very clear this game isn't merely inspired by the Blue Bomber, it is the Blue Bomber. If you have even a passing awareness of Mega Man, the similarities are blatant. At least when you put the game into words and fancy mock-up screenshots like the ones shown below. This is where MNN hits its first hurdle. Those screenshots were meant to give an idea of what the game would be like. In fact, they're not even screenshots, they're concepts. Now with the benefit of hindsight, we can compare that to the final game, and yeah, that sudden aroma of fecal matter isn't coming from your pet. Where to even begin with this? Notice the volumetric lighting from the windows, the bright glow from the enemies, the flare coming from Mega Man, I mean Beck's gun, the shadows and the objects in the foreground. Despite how dark the lighting is, the characters and the environment show a lot of color and vibrancy. There's a lot of energy and pep going on, and you can clearly tell it was drawn by human hands. Compare that to the final game, and you have something that's clearly been rendered in some 3D program from the start. Everything is dull and lifeless, without a soul and without energy, all washed out. It looks like it was spat out by a computer in a couple of minutes, or a 3D modeler told to just do some characters without ever being touched by an artist. All that's really compounded by a September 30th update in 2013. i.e. one day before the funding period ended, that showed off some gameplay. It was totally different from the concept art, showing the 2.5D look and the standard 3D models instead of the hand-drawn looking assets. You could argue that since this was released before the end of the campaign, that anyone who didn't like it could back out still. But there are a few counterpoints. The first is that it was released a day to go in the campaign, so it didn't give people much time to see it and make a choice. The second thing is that Concept said this was made in only 7 days and was just a test, using placeholder assets. That would have made it very hard to judge how similar it looked to the final game, which turned out to be the case. As you'll see in the comment section of the video, many people, including myself, would argue this very brief 13-second clip looks, visually speaking, better than the final product. The lighting is better, the character models are better modeled, and they're better animated, though of course it's still not as good as those concepts we saw earlier. It's hard to say what happened between this and the final product. Maybe they didn't have enough money to keep up the consistency in the animation or modeling and art departments. Maybe they decided to go with the look they have now intentionally for whatever reason. How could this have happened when the game was being led by an artist? Well, beyond that, the page is pretty sparse. The rest of the text is all about reinforcing the ties to Mega Man, and only a few scraps of text explain how this will be remotely different to avoid a lawsuit from Capcom. Of course, our hero Beck earns new weapons as he defeats each of his fellow Mighty Number boss robots. But more than that, his body itself can also reconfigure into new shapes, allowing for all kinds of new skills and abilities. For example, his limbs might become giant magnets, enabling him to walk up walls or rip away enemy shields. Or maybe extendable spring-loaded hands would allow him to activate faraway switches or work as a grappling hook. Or he could have a tank-like body, easily crossing over spikes and pushing objects around the levels. These are just a few possibilities we're considering. The game is still in design phase, but you get the idea. As far as I'm aware, this mechanic has been dropped completely from the game. At least, as it was explained in this original pitch. We've seen him get a sword arm thing, the ability to shoot fire from his head, but that's all using the boss's abilities. There's speculation online that this mechanic has been dropped, but nothing's been officially stated to my knowledge. Instead, that mechanic has been replaced with some kind of bizarre melee combo system. These are called dash attacks, and they work by hitting an enemy a couple of times with your standard attack, then dashing into them a couple of times to finally destroy them, building up your combos for points, refilling your health, and getting better abilities somehow. I haven't played the game for myself, but this feels really cheap compared to the previous transformation mechanic. Instead of being able to morph into giant hammer or shield or bulldozer as shown in the concept art, we instead get to bash enemies with our faces. Besides, that sounds like it'd really slow down gameplay if you have to stop and punch every enemy before you can actually kill them. One thing that Mighty No. 9 and Concept have in their favor is the documentary series with 2Player Productions, the same team that worked with Double Fine on the Double Fine Adventure documentary. One of the stretch goals was for Concept to hire 2Player Productions to shoot 3 half-an-hour-long shows documenting the development of the game, later expanded to 4 episodes. It was reached at $1.75 million, and the episodes were supposed to be released throughout the game's development. At least that's the impression given at the time. Episode 0 released several years ago now, but Episode 1 didn't happen until just a few days ago, which, by the way, is why I had to completely overhaul half of this video at the last minute. It took them years to get it out, and they never mentioned it at all, but at least it's starting to come out now on the eve of Mighty No. 9's release, and, as you'd expect from 2Player Productions, it's actually really good. It'll be interesting to see if they talk about why the game was delayed so many times, or talk about their experience on Kickstarter and dealing with the backlash, maybe if they want to ever use Kickstarter again, or if they're just going to ignore it from now on, maybe what they could have done better. Maybe they might even admit some of their mistakes. That's probably unlikely. That's really all she wrote when it comes to the Kickstarter campaign. It's a string of broken promises, intentional vagalities, and Mega Man references. You can't help but get the impression that Concept could have just wrote, "This is the next Mega Man game" on the page and it would have gotten funded. But that makes all this worse, making Inafune out to be a vampire, preying on innocent victims desperate for something new with their favorite old thing. If I sound too cynical about this campaign, it's because I'm merely reflecting the mood of the Kickstarter itself. This doesn't feel like a project being worked on by people who are passionate about it. It feels like someone trying to cash in on the lack of Mega Man games while also laying the groundwork for a massive franchise. And we already know the second part to be true. I'm not going to say Inafune doesn't care about Mighty No. 9 or its backers, stroke fans, however many of those are left, and I'm not even going to say he's a money-hungry scam artist like so many others. Maybe he really is passionate about this project. Maybe he wants to see this new franchise succeed where the old one failed so many times. I don't know if Mighty No. 9 will be any good, I haven't played it yet, but from what I've seen, compared to with what the Kickstarter page promised, I'm seeing 2 totally different games. I think Inafune thought he could get away with anything he wanted based on his name and reputation. Not necessarily in an evil EA or Ubisoft way, but more like if there were any problems with this game or anything he said, his reputation would give him a cushion to fall back on. But that hasn't been the case, and honestly, I'm glad it hasn't been. As seen with Tim Schafer, to a slightly less fair degree, I think, backers and fans are holding these developers responsible for their actions. One day, after another Mighty No. 9, or 2, or 3, people are going to be done with second chances and playing what feels more and more like Russian roulette with their money. I just hope one day developers will learn to stop trading on their name and nostalgia, and start holding themselves accountable when things go wrong. Not to just sit on their name and rely on that, but to actually work and produce something new, something exciting, something that'll live up to what you promised. A lot of that has to do with learning how to use a new medium. Kickstarter has only been viable for 3 or 4 years now, but in cases like Mighty No. 9 and Red Ash, you really have to ask yourself how much these failures were due to inexperience, and how much of it was from a money-hungry scam artist.
みんなで力を合わせていいゲームを作っていきましょう。みんなの力を貸してください。キックスターターで夢を叶えましょう。
Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed the episode. It's been a pretty slow week for us here at Clickus, what with E3 going on, but now that the show's wrapped up and we've had time to reflect, there are definitely some big articles coming soon, mostly about gameplay for Bloodstained, We Happy Few, and Shantae Half Genie Hero, so be sure to look out for those. We also did our question of the week, which should have gone up yesterday, about our most exciting and least exciting games from E3, not just crowdfunding stuff, so that's a bit different from the site. So if you like the show and you like our content on our website, why not try donating to our Patreon page so we can make things better, maybe. Possibly, I don't actually know. Probably just kind of buy chinchillas with the money, really. That was the best I could think of off the top of my head.